Welcome to Application, the TYPO3 Community Podcast.
Hi, my name is Susie, and this is Application, the TYPO3 Community Podcast, sharing your stories, your projects, and the difference you make. Celebrate the TYPO3 community on Application, the TYPO3 Podcast. Meet the humans behind the technology.
1, 2. Welcome to Application, the TYPO3 Community Podcast. I'm Jeffrey A. McGuire. You can call me Jam. And this is where we celebrate the TYPO3 community, sharing your stories, talking about your projects and the difference you make in, around, and with TYPO3 CMS. It was my pleasure and privilege to finally get Susi Moog on the podcast today. We've been circling around each other trying to get this one booked for a really long time, and we recorded this in late 2021. Susie and I have a chat about how she found TYPO3 and her career-long mission to solve cool problems and help people solve their own problems, whether by making the core better or making the documentation better to help us then figure where we blocked ourselves, what we did wrong, and how we do it right the next time. As well as working as a developer 1 day a week, Susie is the Chief Operating Officer of the TYPO3 GmbH, and we get a chance to talk about her view on the role and the position and how the TYPO3 company enhances the CMS technology and supports the community and the agencies and the professionals within it. I hope you enjoy listening to this podcast as much as I enjoyed talking with Susie. Susi Moog, tell us a little about yourself. Who are you? What do you do? Why are you in meetings all the time?
I have no idea on the last one. Other than that, I'm Susie. I'm COO of the TYPO3 GmbH since nearly a year now. And I work with TYPO3 for a long time. So mainly my job nowadays is communicating with people and listening to people and then telling other people what those people said.
So you're COO of the TYPO3 GmbH, you said.
Yes.
Now, one of the things that I love about the TYPO3 community's structure is that you have this company and an association and the community of professionals and people who do TYPO3. And it seems to me to be a really balanced structure. How do you view, what does your sort of daily job look like? And I know talking to people, you already said it, and listening to people, but what does the GmbH do for TYPO3, the open source CMS?
So what are we doing for the TYPO3 community? I don't know, a lot of things, a lot of little things. So we are providing some of the infrastructure. For example, we are hosting and coding mytypo3.org. We have written the exam tool where you can do your certification online. We are writing the blog extension and publishing that. We answer support questions. We provide extended long-term support for TYPO3. So the community provides the first 3 years of support, and then the company takes over and provides another few years if you don't manage to upgrade so fast. So you can use that to get a bit more value out of your TYPO3 installation.
So having 3 years of extended support from the company on top of 3 years of the typical community support that is similar to what a lot of open source communities does, gives people who want to use TYPO3 as a tool, right? If you're considering, if you need a CMS for your agency, you need something open source. That means that TYPO3 is officially supported for 6 years because you are the representative of or the official vendor of TYPO3 CMS, all open source, all GPL, but somebody very smart early on decided to get everybody to sign a contributor's license so you can actually have a vendor. And that's super cool in the times of GDPR needs compliant supported software and all that kind of thing. So as we look to getting more people to adopt TYPO3, I think that's a really, really good selling point to keep in mind, that it actually has an official vendor and official support. So all of that stuff adds up to providing enhancements in and around TYPO3 and maybe, would you say, filling in gaps where other service providers are not doing a particular activity, or maybe there's something that's not so easy to do profitably for an agency?
our focus is on things that agencies can't easily provide. Like the ELTS is one thing, but also like support for the community. We are trying to spend our money in a way that supports the product as a whole. This is not a thing that a single agency could do in the same way, but something bigger than that or more encompassing. For example, we are also trying to bring TYPO3 to new markets or
Mm.
do marketing in other countries. And this is something that one single agency wouldn't try, or we work together with some agencies, but you need someone to coordinate all that. The focus is always to bring TYPO3 as a whole forward, which in turn then results in profits for the agencies, because the more people that use TYPO3, the better for the TYPO3 agencies, I think.
It's really interesting. Maybe you're like a meta arm of the association, right? Where generally the association makes decisions about direction and which things to support, but then still needs people to get stuff done. And in your charter, of course, it says that you're not allowed to do anything that competes with professionals, with agencies, with other companies in the ecosystem, which I think is incredibly smart and healthy too. Do you have any good stories about the GmbH making a difference and making something, blossom that wouldn't have been possible otherwise?
I have a hard time with absolute, so I can't guarantee that it wouldn't have been possible without us in any way. But I think things like the mytypo3.org platform as we have it now, or the online certification in the amount of time it took us to provide that service, wouldn't have been possible if we hadn't done that. And that's
Mm.
not to say that the Typo3 community isn't able to do a lot of really, really cool stuff. But some things are more easily done if you work full time on them. So that's one of the main parts where I see us come in. So open source is great, but we need to keep in mind that people have lives besides open source usually.
Yeah.
There are tasks that are better or more easily done by people that can spend all of their time on them.
That's a great point. And I think maybe that helps reduce the level of burnout in the Typo3 community. I've been involved and observed other communities where everything is done by volunteers on principle, and it gets really, really tough, and it gets really, really tough to stay motivated and keep doing it year after year and keep diving in there. So that's a really good point. And I think training and certification, the certification is an ideal example of something that is a huge amount of work to organize and a huge amount of work to maintain. Yet the agencies and companies and the community very much benefits from it as a whole. Whether you want to prove that you're good enough to get a job, whether you need some sort of indication of whether you can hire someone, all those kind of things, and frankly, especially in Europe, certifications, having a piece of paper or an NFT now that says you're qualified. Haha, I slipped it in. That qualified to do something, right, is a big help. Like if it's on paper and got a stamp on it, then it's real in Europe, right?
Yeah, and the certification is a good example for another reason, because that's one of the areas where we work closely with the community team. So the certification itself is created by a community team that is deeply into the knowledge necessary for a certification. But we review the certifications and we provide the tooling and the day-to-day support for doing the certification. So that's a nice example of how we can work together to get something done.
How did you get involved in Typo3? What was your first Typo3 experience?
Getting it installed in comparison to the other systems I used or tried to use. It was during my university time where I was asked to create a website for our alumni club, which I was part of, even though I wasn't finished. But so they wanted to have a website, and I found out that I should use a content management system. That was 2004 or 5, something like
Okay.
that. Yeah, the first few tries I had with content management systems, people said I should use, just didn't work out. So then I used Typo3 because everybody else was using Typo3 at that point in Germany.
Where were
And I
you
worked
studying?
in Wilhelmshaven in northern Germany
Uh-huh.
at the coast.
Okay.
Media economics and journalism.
Nice. Nice. That's direct path to COO of a technology company.
Of course it is.
Wait, so you just went through a series of, were they open source CMSs, and
Yeah.
TYPO3 was the first one you got installed?
Yeah, but I didn't have any technical background, so for me, for years, it was so funny to hear people say that TYPO3 is so hard, because I was always thinking, well, TYPO3 was the only thing I even got installed. Everything else was harder for me.
Which is funny. I was complaining about the installation process a few years ago to someone. It was actually at the TYPO3 conference. I was complaining about a couple of its quirks, like you have to know when to reload the page because it doesn't say to do it, and you have to know that the successful installation gives you an error message, and a couple other things. And this guy looks at me and goes, "Why would you ever install it yourself? You're supposed to hire a professional."
See?
So
So why didn't you, Jeffrey?
well, I mean, so open source has that old story of, like, there's people with time and not much money, and there's people with budget who need it yesterday, and that's how we do the service providing, right? So on the other hand, now for our company website at Open Strategy Partners, it's TYPO3, and I'm in the back end every day, and I'm really enjoying actually touching the stuff again. It's cool.
And for the one thing, just for the error message that comes up when you install it, that was fixed. It's now a nice shiny green message
Oh,
telling you
wow.
that you successfully downloaded it and you can get started now.
I'm almost disappointed.
It's not scaring anyone anymore.
Okay, so that club is over. All right, I'll have to retire that joke now. So you said you were building this website in 2004-ish. Do you remember what version of TYPO3 that was?
3.7 or 3.8.
Pretty early.
Yeah.
You made that alumni website at university. Did you enjoy using TYPO3?
Yes.
What was it that you liked? I remember coding something even before CMSs, and then it was online, and it's visible, and changed the green background to red or whatever, and it felt incredibly powerful to me.
For me, the thing I liked most was TypoScript, because I couldn't program at all.
Isn't TypoScript programming in the end?
No, not really. TypoScript is just configuring stuff. So yeah, I mean, if you want to call that programming, for me, that's configuration, and it's just you add some lines of configuration, and you can influence the whole rendering process,
Yeah.
and without having to code. And for me, that was great, because I didn't want to learn to code at that point.
It's also a really interesting architectural choice. On top of TYPO3 having always been decoupled, right? There's also this potential interface language that you don't have to use if you don't want to influence what goes on, to change what goes on between the two systems. It's pretty wild, and it allows people to put together TYPO3 sites in a lot of different styles, right? And I'm talking about working styles, right? Using TypoScript or not, and how they depend each other. So okay, so you enjoyed TypoScript. Then what happened in your TYPO3 life?
Everything. I mean, it's the last 15 years. It's like asking me what happened in your life.
Yeah, okay. What was your first job with TYPO3?
The same one I still have as the second job next to the TYPO3 GmbH. So I work in a TYPO3 agency as developer, and started that in 2008.
Wow,
And
okay. That's
never
Noista,
really
isn't it?
stopped. Yeah, it is.
Nice. So wow, so you started at a TYPO3 agency, and you still do that.
Yep.
That's cool.
And
Okay.
I mean, I like the company, and so I wanted to keep that connection alive, and that's why I'm just doing a little, but I'm still doing that. And I really enjoy getting in touch with all those people again. And
Yeah.
I have a reason to go to Bremen twice a year, where I lived for a long time. So it's
Sure.
nice to go back sometimes.
And I think that if you think about the role of the GmbH, it's great for someone in your position where you have responsibilities and hopes and wishes about helping the community and improving the system and everything. If you keep your fingers in actual client projects and the actual, like, today's APIs, and integrating with real world problems, SAP, Salesforce, whatever, I can imagine that helps you develop empathy and keep your skills up, and like that must help I think that must help your TYPO3 job, right?
Yeah, that does a lot. So in my opinion, it's a totally different job as working as an agency developer than as a framework developer or maintainer.
Ah,
Because the things you use and need and build are completely different. And working in the agency helps me to understand why things are needed, what kind of problems we are trying to solve. So I like solving problems with documentation or with code.
mm,
And if we build a framework or write a piece of documentation, we are trying to solve a problem for someone. And having an understanding of what that problem looks like
right,
helps to solve it. Otherwise, we
right.
are just guessing.
Exactly, and that comes to over in startup land that's called product market fit somehow, right? Or a solution looking for a problem, right? And you don't want to work that way around. Cool, that's really really neat. If you could start over, would you take a different path learning Typo 3? Would you do it a different way?
Nah, I don't think so. I had a book and TypoScript, and that was
Nice.
everything I needed. I actually had that book right next to me, behind me, the Typo 3 original book. I think it's from 2004.
It's nice that you
So
still have it.
that's the only Typo 3 book I kept. I had a lot of them over the years, and this is the one I always kept through every move. That book has to come.
Yep, yep, yep. It's where everything started. I have a dictionary at home, like a paperback dictionary that's lost the front cover and it's super worn. And that is the dictionary I learned German with, right? So that's my thing. And it was also
Yeah.
before the internet and before Duolingo and before any of that stuff. So I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, I also have kind of like the offline Wikipedia down there. I have books where you can look words up and see what they
Whoa,
mean.
you have dictionaries and encyclopedias?
Yeah,
Oh, okay,
real
this
ones.
is this is getting better and better. I bought a set of encyclopedias from a German high school in Cologne, a gymnasium. I bought an old set of encyclopedias, and they were a subscription set where somebody at the school bought the subscription, and every week or every month they would send 50 pages or 100 pages or something in these sort of magazines, and then they were put into the old leather covers, right?
Yeah,
And then the leather things were like 10 centimeters thick, and I probably have 25 or 30 of those. And there's really cool old photos. And I think they're from like maybe the late 20s or the early 30s. As a very proud Wahlkölner, right? I really love living in Cologne and I've been here for a very long time. I looked up carnival in this thing and it says, "Oh, the Rhineland famous party, blah, 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 blah." And it goes, and it literally said, "As everyone knows, Cologne Carnival is great, but in Dusseldorf or Bonn, it's just really not the same, and it's just not worth going." It's so hilarious that rivalry's been going on forever.
I don't understand Carnival at all. So just keep that in Cologne and don't let it leave.
Anyway, that talking about encyclopedias reminded me of that. And if somebody came to you today wanting a career in web or needing a new technology or something, if you had a good excuse to say, "Hey, you should check out Typo 3," what would you tell them how to start them off? How should they learn?
Today, I would probably recommend to go to the documentation and to read the Typo 3 guidebook, depending on how they learn best. Maybe I would first ask them how they learn best, because you have different
Mm,
types of people, and some really like videos,
yeah.
which I, for example, can't understand at all. I want a book and I want to work through it myself, and
Cool.
don't want. I just don't like people telling me what to do, so I don't like videos.
Okay. Now I understand. Fair enough.
Hmm.
I kind of like a mixture. When we work on the media stuff here in doing this podcast and the others that we do, we use a free piece of software which is really fantastic called DaVinci Resolve, which I know they use at the GmbH as well. Honestly, every single time I have a question or I get stuck on something, I go online and there is always a video. There's always like a 1 minute or a 5 minute video. And like I think for that super quick help, those are incredibly useful.
I still prefer blog posts with screenshots.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
maybe I'm
nice.
just
Okay.
old. Could also
Okay.
be the
And
case,
code
but
code samples.
yeah, code samples or blog posts with screenshots for the visual things.
Mm-hmm.
I really sound like my own grandmother, but I don't like that you have to listen to the whole video and then you can't search in it, and then you have to switch and
Yeah. 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 I mean, I think with the AI technologies, the whole sort of indexing spoken content is starting to happen, but it's the thing that I use to transcribe is incredibly random about saying type of threes and many other versions of typo 3 every time we do it. And interestingly, the other incredibly disadvantaged format on the internet is music. There's no native way to code a sound or a particular note or have that your browser read sheet music. So that's a very good point. We put up a transcript of all of these podcasts for exactly that reason. Also good for
I
SEO.
read your transcripts.
Really?
Instead of most of the time, I don't have the patience for watching or listening. And for 90% of the podcasts, I start listening to them and then I get impatient and stop listening and start reading the transcript.
You know you can put your podcast player on like to play faster, right?
Yeah, I know. I do that already. But starting at 2 times faster than normal, the voices start to kind of mesh
Yeah.
together.
So we do
But I'm
pay.
reading the transcripts. Thank you.
That's interesting. I think we try to get the names right and typo 3 right, but we mostly leave the robots to it. So you said you like to read blogs and learn from blogs and with screenshots and code and so on. Whose blogs in the typo 3 community do you follow or find especially helpful?
The two Daniels come to mind as first resource. So
Daniel
Friedman and
Siebmann
Gertz,
and Daniel Goetz.
those are the main ones. And
Hmm?
then Andy, if he writes a new blog post, I like his blog post, but he's not blogging all that much.
Andy who?
Sometimes Fernandez. Sometimes I read the Nitzan blog posts,
Right.
but I don't really actively follow, except when somebody tweets about it, then I click
Hmm.
on the links. But most of the time, it's just I'm looking for things, how to do things in Typo 3. Yes, I still don't know everything, so I'm Googling
Sure.
a lot, and then I find blog posts and then I read them. So it doesn't really matter from whom they are. There's a lot of agencies blogging, for example,
Yeah.
which you can find if you have a concrete problem, and I like that. Also, Mark Willman has a blog, I think.
How much of your job is still coding stuff?
None.
Okay, so you do typo 3 for fun now, coding on the side.
Yeah, yeah. So I have so first of all, I have a second job
Uh-huh.
where I still code. So I'm doing 40 hours GmbH and 8 hours the other job, and the other job is actually coding. So I get my fingers wet.
Oh, that sounds kind of perfect. Yeah.
Even community-wise, I'm doing more documentation teamwork these days. Of course, I can still code and I write helper tools all the time, but
Right.
I'm not actively involved in the core development anymore because I think documentation is currently more important or more matching to my skills and the time I have.
That's cool though, because just like you've been talking about, if somebody has a specific need, they can Google it and find the documentation. And the Typo 3 documentation is really good, and it seems to be getting better and better and better in the last few years. So thank you for helping with that. What do you think about growing Typo 3 beyond Europe, and what can we do to spread the word or to convince more people to try it?
Documentation is an important part of that. I have
Great.
to say that. Then I think we need some kind of educational material that is not strictly documentation, but more guided in a way. I'm not fully sure how that looks like. So that might be video courses or real trainings or kind of university courses.
Also, just getting it in front of people in those moments when they need to build a website or need to solve a technical
Yeah.
problem and just making it. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I've been talking with some people about potentially doing content aimed at editors and backend users. I don't know, basic to medium advanced, using the back end and doing your daily job, but not so much like how to put a site together. The supposition is that a lot of content authors or marketing teams, if you show a marketing team a pretty back end that can do like a something nice on the front, then they'll be excited, right? And then if you can show the content authors like the approval workflows or a spell checker built in or whatever, show them that their life could be easier. It seems that those people are, able to influence the purchase decision of a given technology.
I mean, I don't know, because you asked about what do we do outside of Europe. I don't know, and I don't know if there's one answer, because it probably depends on the market you are targeting.
Yeah.
Because for a long time, at least in Germany, it was the technical elites that took the decision of which system to use, and it's switching over the last few years a bit in being more the marketing department that's taking these decisions.
Yep.
However, I don't know how that is for every other country in the world. So I could imagine that there's still countries where there's the developers taking these decisions. I could imagine that there's countries where it's the marketing agency.
That would be really, really interesting to find out. I bet Daniel, the other Daniel, Omorodian, has some ideas about that, but he's been getting around a lot lately. I'd love to. Oh, that would be a cool thing to ask, because I figure by being present at CMS Africa and by helping the government in Rwanda and there's a couple other places now, I can imagine that that'll create some local employment and knowledge that will create more value. But I have no idea who made those decisions. So that is a really interesting thing to investigate. Thank you. That's cool. What one word would you use to describe TYPO3?
Powerful.
What are your favorite features of TYPO3?
The list module multi-editing and the clipboard number 2.
Wait, clipboard number 2?
For some reason, I'm always using clipboard number 2 for multi-selection and multi-copying and stuff like that.
The clipboard is pretty interesting in TYPO3. Can you just describe it from your perspective, what you do with it, what it's sort of capable of?
I'm a lazy editor, so I'm creating a layout once with all the content elements on it, and then I go to the list module and just select every content element I need on the second and third and fourth page. So I did, for the relaunch of typo3.com, I did a lot of editor work, and I basically copied everything all the time. Yeah, that's what I did with the clipboard. I copied stuff.
Nice. So for example, you make a page putting in all the different content elements you want, semantically organized, blah, blah, blah. And then you take that and you copy that as a template and reuse it to make new pages.
Yeah.
Super cool.
But I don't copy all of that, but just 90% of it. That's the nice thing. So I can select what I need.
Super cool. What feature would you like to see added to TYPO3?
Bike changing of single elements. I'm laughing because I told Benny about that already. So I'm kind of a complainy editor.
Okay.
So if I'm missing something, you will know.
Oh no, that's you are a responsible community contributor and you file good bug reports.
That's probably the American way of putting it.
So what was the feature that you requested?
If you have you copy and paste it now all your elements, and now you want to edit a single field of every element and give it the same value. So you can already open that single field for all of the elements. That's working already because TYPO3 can do that. But what I want to do is set the checkbox once and it will add it for everything.
Oh.
Basically bulk change.
Oh, okay.
Things.
Okay, that's cool. Couldn't you make that one content element? Couldn't you put it somewhere else in the page tree and then symlink to it into the pages?
No, not like that. So, like for example, you have a let's make a stupid example. You have a checkbox in every content element that decides whether the content element will have a green or red background.
Okay, very important.
So on the first page, every content element has a green background. Now on the second page, you want all of them to have the red background. Now you need to open every element or the list of elements and click the checkbox 30 times.
Yep.
Instead of doing that, I want to have one checkbox that says, do this for all of these.
So macros, bulk edits, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Cool. Now, even better, what feature would you like to see removed from TYPO3?
Open documents.
Why?
I don't really want it to remove that, just don't use it.
Okay.
I don't have anything against features.
Tell us something that you wish people knew about TYPO3, but they usually don't.
You don't need Composer in production, even though you can use TYPO3 in Composer mode. So you can use TYPO3 in Composer mode even if you don't have Composer on production systems.
Wow. Okay, that is pretty wild. I definitely didn't know that. So do you have to put Composer back in to do updates or changes then?
No, so you can develop locally with Composer and use
Right.
Composer to get your TYPO3 running and installed and everything. And then you deploy it. And on the target system, you don't necessarily need Composer. So
Oh,
all of the
okay.
Composer operations can just happen locally.
So then you do
That's
your
just,
you do your update and your upgrade and your changes locally and push them again. Okay,
yeah.
that makes perfect sense. That is good to know, and then you save yourself a lot of hassle not having that on your target server. That's really helpful. What is the coolest thing you ever built with TYPO3?
There are multiple things that I found cool. So way back when I just started working with TYPO3, we built a Flash map plugin with
Yeah.
TYPO3 where the data was coming from TYPO3 and Flash was displaying a map. And that was the first time I ever used real math in my developer job.
Oh.
So, like, we needed to calculate the distances because the map wasn't a normal map. So, like today, now I'm sounding like grandma again, but today you just use Google Maps or any of the other map APIs
Yeah.
to do all the calculations for you. And back then we had this Flash application with the pictures coming from the client, and he said, okay, now you need to show a point with these geographical coordinates,
Yeah.
and you needed to figure out how to calculate where on the map that point goes.
I remember map rendering too, and like leaf rendering, and oh yeah, I do remember when we used to have to solve that. It's so funny being in open source for so long, how the problem spaces have changed, and I don't notice it unless I actually stop and think about it. You know, when TYPO3 started, there was no GitHub, and there was none of these community tools, and none of these anything as a service, right? And the early communities, TYPO3, Joomla, Drupal, and so on, invented how to be and how to build and how to support a community, not just building a CMS with this incredible infrastructure that everybody has now, but like every single thing was new and single thing was a decision. And I mean, I think it built great communities, right? It incredible circles of friends and professionals and people who love interacting and doing this thing even now. But boy, it was really different, eh?
Yeah, I mean, we used to send patches via mail to a mailing list. So you had a patch file that you
No.
could review, and it's gotten so much better. But I don't want to say that there aren't any problems today, and it's just different kinds of problems. It's not better or worse. It's just different.
Things are more complex now, and some base level of complexity is taken over, and we're trying to solve the next set of problems, right? And in
Yeah,
10 years those will be solved and look and sound old fashioned too. Sure.
yeah. I mean, if you do artificial intelligence, for example, you will need math pretty fast again. So your map problem may be solved, but now you have a new problem.
Yeah. I wanted to compare it to my so I've been working remote since 2000, and that was before remote was a thing. And honestly, and I was working in the film industry, and a courier would show up at my house with VHS video cassettes and paper movie scripts, and then I would do stuff on my computer and then save the stuff that I'd done to a floppy disk and put it back in a big envelope with the other materials, you know, all under NDA and everything, and then call the courier and be like, "Yep, I'm done with this one," and they would come and they would take it to the take it back, and yeah, but it worked. It worked. It worked. So we have a little
Grandfather
thing
race.
that we like to call the suggest a guest. Who is it that we should call up and talk to in season 3 of application, the TYPO3 Community Podcast?
That's a really hard question to answer because there are so many people in this community and everybody has a great story to tell. So
And that's why we're here, and that's why we need to do more.
So I'm going with Tom Warwick, who's part of the documentation team
Tom
and
Warwick, great.
working with me a lot on the documentation. Then I'm going with Ollie Harder, who's the leader of the security team
Perfect.
and from Bavaria and likes beer.
Hey, I'm from Cologne and I like beer.
No, you don't have beer.
Stop the recording. Okay. So Oliver Harder, and then?
And then, yeah, I don't know. You could probably ask the whole documentation team. So Lina Wolf, for example, or Alexander Nietzsche, or there's also Lolly from the core team, who's
Absolutely.
good guest, I think.
Yeah. Great.
So
okay.
There's a million people.
Right. So, Susie, fantastic talking with you. Thank you so much for taking the time. And it's great to see you. And it would be cool to see you in, not in pixels, but actually over beers of your choice. Yeah. I'm glad you're well. And I'm really, really grateful that you took the time to talk with us.
Finally.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you too.
Thanks to the TYPO3 Association for sponsoring this podcast. Thank you B13 and Stephanie Kreutzer for our logo. Merci beaucoup Patrick Gaumont, TYPO3 developer and musician extraordinaire for our theme music. Thanks again to today's guest. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to subscribe in the podcast app of your choice and share Application, the TYPO3 Community Podcast, with your friends and colleagues. If you didn't like it, please share it with your enemies. Would you like to play along and suggest a guest for the podcast? Do you have questions or comments? Reach out to us on Twitter at TYPO3 Podcast. You can find show notes, links, and more information in our posts on typo3.org. Remember, open source software would not be what it is without you. Thank you all for your contributions. How are we doing? How are the robots doing in the transcription mines?
Well, you should seriously think about using Jam as a short name for yourself. Maybe Jeffrey would actually be better because it makes Jam with the G out of it all the time.
Oh, but I'm so precious.
Are you really?
I swear to God, I've never made that joke before. So
a bit. Just a bit. I'm just going to continue calling you Jeffrey now because now everything else will be weird.
Okay, we've crossed that border.
Or there's also Lolly from the core team, who's
absolutely
good guest, I think.
Yeah. Great.
So
okay.
There's a million people.
Right. So to Carl behind the scenes, when she said lolly, that's spelt CHRISTIAN and then a new word KUHN, I think.
Yes.
And it's pronounced lolly. German's crazy that way.